Welcome to my cake kitchen. Am I very confused? Yes, I am. Okay, because I was here earlier to help you, show you how to make a sponge cake from scratch, and we've derived a sponge, except I've just checked and the sponge is done. This is the result of how to make a sponge cake. Okay, so let's get that out of the oven quickly and I'll talk you through how we got here. The live on how we created this cake is already out for you to check. We had some technical issues, so let me just get the cake out and then we can talk about the sponge. Okay, right, so if you want to see the sponge cake, this is it. It's been baking for almost like 50 minutes, 45-50 minutes, and this is what we have. Oh, okay. It fell out. Okay, I'm just going to leave it on the countertop because if I mess with it, it's just going to break and I can't afford that. So I'm just going to leave that on the side. There you go. There you go. Right, so, oh my goodness, bear with me. Right, so I'm just going to help myself because, thank you, right? It's such a delicate sponge, I don't want to mess around with it. Mr. Hicken, hi there, how are you? Welcome, welcome, welcome. And that's the 8-inch sponge. So this is one part of the 8-inch sponge cake that we derived on the live. And this is the result. Can you see? It has baked super light. It looks delicate. Of course, if I mess around with it, it is going to fall over. Millie, hi there, Millie. And this is the sponge here, the other one. So the hole you see there was me trying to test it. So let's try and see if we can flip that too. So this is basically the result of having baked the cake. So how did we get here? The cake was already baked in a previous live, but I didn't want to hold up the live for the hour, 50 minutes to the hour. So I thought, let's check out, come back and have a look at our finished result. And clearly here is the result of the bake. So let's, oh, okay. Right, so you know what? Let's talk about this. So the result is great. I actually like this cake. This is going to be a 4-layered 8-inch cake. A 4-layered 8-inch cake, but it's baked different. Can you see? This is a little lighter. The top of this is way lighter and more delicate, and the other is a little darker. The difference was how they are positioned in the oven. I think my oven across is about 15 inches width, 15-16 inches width. And because the tins, these are 8-inch tins, and because they have a lid, the 16-inch width doesn't take the two tins on side by side. So one has to go in and the one has to sit at the front of the oven. As a result, the one that went right into the back of the oven, which has direct face into the heat source, has baked a little browner. And of course, the one that was sitting at the front has baked a little tender and lighter. Does that make it a terrible cake? Not at all. And Mr. Hicken was just saying that, yes, this is, there's a cake that is, this one is kind of squished on the front. I'll just turn it around. I mean, the idea is that it's not helpful for you to mess about with a cake once it has finished baking. You want to leave it to sit first. But the reason why it's rippled is because when I tried to turn the cake around, it tipped over and it fell out. So I am happy the cake is not broken apart, but I don't want to be messing with it because if I touch it any further, it is going to end up collapsing. And If anything, the bake itself is tender. It is super light. And that is not because we have just finished baking the cake. Obviously, once the cake finishes baking, you look at it and it is tender, it is soft, it's lightly textured, it's great. But the strength of a cake or the quality of a cake shows itself when the cake is eventually left to set and then you put it together. So normally at this stage, I will leave it because I need this cake to, I'm working with it by morning. I'm going to wrap this up in cling film, leave it on a countertop, and by morning it will come together. This is not my first time making a sponge cake, so I can attest to the quality of this cake. And I can tell you it's a great cake. I will just talk you through how we got here because it's nearly 4:45 and I'm aiming to be done for 5 on the dot because I have somewhere to be and I don't want to keep people waiting. But that said, earlier when we were baking this cake, we had some technical difficulties. And the technical difficulty is that we were on the live and then my light electrics tripped and went out, probably because of some electrical thing. So the first part of the live, I think about 10 minutes in, is gone. I've just gone back to check and it seemed like it went. And the reason I couldn't see how it's not on YouTube, and that's probably because I am streaming over a software program. So that is one good reason for it. But saying that, I will just bring you up to speed so that you are not lost on the information on how I got here. And the intention is that if you're new to the channel or if you're new to baking and you want to be able to bake yourself a lightly textured sponge, which is great, which has a good quality crumb that holds yet tastes better, then yes, this is the result of what we derived. Of course, for the ingredients, I will be relisting everything under the description box when I come to optimizing it. But we used margarine and caster sugar. The margarine was melted a little softer than the recommended room temperature, and the intention was to make it so soft so that we can bring the butter, when it is beaten together, we can bring it back with egg yolks. So the simple technique was to add the melted margarine to caster sugar, beat it together with vanilla, and the intention was to cream it until the mixture seemed like it was breaking. You almost have to observe and see and have visual cues for when you're creaming. Generally, I like to go with time and observing other than giving you the blanket, oh, cream it till it is light and fluffy. Because light and fluffy is very varied and the spectrum of what looks light and fluffy may vary from person to person. So generally, when I recommend for creaming, say margarine, especially soft, you're looking at 4 to 6 minutes. And 4 minutes means that on a good weather day when it's cold and you don't have influence in weather conditions over your margarine and solid fat, 4 minutes is just about enough. I use a stand mixer here, which is my K-Mix, and we're looking at speed 3.5 to 4. So these are the specific information you need to kind of derive yourself the basic creaming of the butter and sugar with the vanilla together. That said, today we went all the way to the 6 mark, and that is because when you're creaming the butter, the essence of creaming the butter and sugar together is to create air pockets that will eventually help trap the gases and hold when other ingredients and the baking process, steam and heat, ends up influencing the bake and creating the structure of your cake. There's a long scientific process to the way cakes are made, but follow me on this one. So if you are sort of creating the air pockets, because the whole idea of the sugar and butter creaming together is the sugar have little like crystals that are digging into the butter and they're wrapping it around themselves, creating like layers and layers of like I'm no science teacher, okay? I had to learn this by doing and understanding what is happening. So bear with me, but I'm sure on the platform there are creators who are able to break this down with the scientific terms for you. And I will recommend some creators that you can have a better understanding from. So the point of this is that the sugar digs into the butter, creating this air pockets that will trap the gases. And of course, when you do add the other elements, you're talking the eggs that will help with the binding, that will influence texture, trap the moisture in the environment within which it is, tenderizes your bake. And then you add the gluten, which is the thing that will form the structure, because gluten is developed. I thought someone was knocking on my window. But that all said, my point is, I creamed this for 6 minutes because I wanted the sugar and butter to almost get to a point where it is breaking. Because the idea is that you can't just keep creaming and creaming and creaming, hoping that it will get fluffy. Because at some point, the whole idea of getting the air pockets will collapse, especially when you cream it too much, right? So you almost have to have an understanding by observing visually what you're looking at, so that you don't break down the base structure, which is the sugar and butter mix. And on this note, I pushed it to the 6 minute mark because, first of all, my margarine was very soft, and I still needed it to kind of get to the point where it is so soft that it was almost collapsing. And then I followed that with just egg whites. We had a total of nearly 285 grams of eggs here. But for the 285 grams of eggs, 80 grams of that was just egg yolks. And that was because normally over here, I use both egg whites and egg yolks, but you can use egg whites exclusively when depending on what cake you're deriving, i.e. if you're deriving a chiffon cake. Except I wasn't going for a chiffon cake, I was going for a regular sponge cake. But the way I added the eggs made a difference to how delicate the sponge will be, which is that when you add the yolks to the butter first, just the yolks end up emulsifying and holding the butter, as in the base structure, together, creaming it. And yolks do have fat in it. Besides the fact that they contain protein and liquids, they have fat. So by allowing the yolks to cream just by itself with the butter, forms the base, after which the rest of the quantity of eggs, which in this case has a larger quantity of egg whites, because the same quantity of egg, we just took out the egg yolks and left the white. So we have 80 grams of egg yolks exclusively, and then 205 grams of eggs, which is largely the egg whites from which the egg yolks were extracted. So it works out 4 large egg whites with 1 large egg. So I hope it makes sense. So with that, you add that later. Let that cream all together till the eggs are mixed in. Let it beat for another extra 2 minutes before you go in with your flour. Now, we had a total of 450 grams of self-raising flour. The self-raising flour didn't have any additional rising agent or leavening in it, because in England, self-raising flour already comes with leavening in it. So I just added a pinch of salt. The other ingredient that enhanced moisture here was buttermilk. Buttermilk, besides bringing a little bit of tang to your cake, which in this case makes absolutely no difference, adding buttermilk was to enhance the moisture quality of the cake, whilst also helping the acid in my brain has frozen, right? In buttermilk sort of reacts with the leavening. It slows down gluten production, which means that you end up with a slightly tender and lightly textured bake. And boy, can you see the result here? We have such a tender cake that if I attempt to lift this, it will all collapse. But look at this. I won't ruin it for you. The result is good. I'm not mad about it. If anyone you're okay. That said, if you ask me, so why am I bothered about having a light textured bake? Okay, the simple reason why a light textured bake is important is because it makes a difference to the mouthfeel and eating experience of your cake, right? There are different reasons why you will derive different sort of crumb textures for your cake. And a very light textured cake is great for the eating experience because it's light, it absorbs the rest of the additions like your buttercream, right? But the other thing that when you hear light textures, red flags go, red sirens go off in your brain is because when you're looking to stack the cakes, lightly textured is not your option, because if it's lightly textured, it is likely to collapse and will not hold the weight of its own. However, that is true for other sort of cakes like the chiffon type cakes that are super light and almost look spongy, that you can't stack. But for cakes that you can stack, normally the advice is for you to go for a densely structured crumb cake. But I find that for such cakes, if you're not careful, by the time you add buttercream and all the other elements, the cake ends up absorbing structure and then it becomes dough-like and bread-like. So my goal has always been to derive a cake that is great in texture, that doesn't change much during the decoration process, whilst also being able to stack. The stackability of the cake is still important because eventually we're going to stack the cakes, right? So this sort of sponge is a good bridge for that, which is why I didn't go down the chiffon cake method or the white cake method where everything is just super light in a way where stacking it becomes very problematic. So this is a simple sponged cake that has been optimized for the crumb quality to be lightly textured, can be put together easily for you so that you can stack it too. And that is the intention for this cake. So I hope the result of the cake in itself is appealing to you and you can undertake this bake in your own time. That is just about it for this simple cake that I derived from scratch. Of course, this is not the only way you can make a sponge cake. And however you derive your cake, happy baking, and I'm sure I'll see you in my next video.